Let's talk about building your stock DR650 into a bike that can handle high mileage riding. Hello, D-Rock here. Welcome to the channel. I hope you all are well. So let me be a little more specific. I turned my stock DR650 into a bike that is a little more comfortable and capable when it comes to high mileage riding. So in the recent past, I've taken my DR650 on longer rides, 200 mile days, 300 mile days, 400 mile days, 500 mile days. And I also started doing almost 800 mile 2-day trips just to see how the bike would handle, if I'd find it comfortable enough. And while it may not be the best bike for that type of riding, it is what I think will work for me currently, because not only do I stay on road, I like to get off road a little bit. And I've essentially taken my DR650 and turned it into like a mini KLR. And what I mean by that is I've added a larger gas tank, some other odds and ends like that to make it not quite as big as a KLR 650, but almost there. So I've got it's a little lighter than a KLR 650, but I'm right. For example, a KLR 650 on its tank, gas tank can get roughly 300 miles. On my bike, I can get about 250 miles off this tank that I have installed. I've got a bigger, more comfortable seat. I've added a windshield, things of that nature. KLR kind of all has these things, the Gen 3, the Gen 2s. They got big gas tanks, big comfortable seats, windscreens. So, which is why I don't have a KLR 650 right now, because I'm just kind of sticking with the DR650 for the minute. Anyway, I'm just going to go over a few of the mods I've done with this bike that you can do as well if it pertains to you. Now, I need to be clear, I am not a certified tech. If I can do any of these things, and they are simple for the most part, then you certainly can. So let's get on in there and talk about this. So the first thing I became conscious of, like I mentioned, I like to go on-road, off-road. I like dual sport motorcycle riding, so that's kind of like the definition of that. I take this bike off-road, I'll take it deep into the desert, way back there, 100 miles deep into the desert. What you become acutely aware of, especially since I'm a solo rider for the most part. Once you get deep into the backcountry, you become extremely conscious of the weight of the bike, especially when you drop it or you get washed out on a rock or some sand or something. Getting that bike up off the ground can become a chore. Doing it once, okay, but when you have to do it 5, 6, 7, 10 times in a stretch, which can happen, it's completely possible, then you will get exhausted and you'll get yourself into probably more trouble. So while I still like the KLR 650 for dual sport riding, I think it can be a little big. So I got a DR650, and its stock form, the DR650 is like, what is it, like 365 pounds. Of course, my bike is heavier than that now because I've added some things, especially armor, and a bigger gas tank, things like that. It's all gonna add weight to the bike. I still think with the way the bike is built now, I still think I'm under what a KLR weighs. And I've dropped this bike a couple times, you know, and getting it up is pretty easy, even with the full tank here, versus getting up a KLR 650. So I still think that I have a lighter bike, and weight definitely makes a big difference. So, and you'll definitely notice that deep in the backcountry and on like places like the interstate. So one of the first things that I wanted, if you have a stock DR650 and you intend to make large rides like 300, 400, 500 mile days, you know, you're just cranking out miles, you're going to have to get rid of the stock seat. The stock seat on a DR650 is brutal. So I went with, this is a ProCycle standard seat here. Let's get out a measuring tape and just see. Sorry, it's raining, so I had to bring the bike in to see how wide the ProCycle seat is versus the stock seat. All right, here is the stock Suzuki seat. We're gonna measure that, and then we're gonna measure the ProCycle seat. Okay, so this is the stock seat. We're gonna have a quick look at this. And what do we got? This is maybe 7.5 inches wide. So that's a big deal. Long distance riding, 300, 400, 500 miles on a seat this narrow, no bueno. All right, now this is the standard ProCycle seat. So this is where your butt's gonna be right here towards the rear of the seat here as you move around. And we're looking about 10.5 inches wide. So that's a big difference versus the stock seat. Huge difference. And you can definitely feel that difference on longer rides. So I can totally vouch for the comfort of a ProCycle standard seat versus the uncomfortability of a stock seat. Now, there's actually quite a few other seats on the market for the DR650, and I can only vouch for the ProCycle standard seat. There's a Corbin, there's also a Sargent, and I think the Sargent seat might be wider than 11 inches. I'm not 100% sure on that since I've never personally experienced one. And you may get a little confusion in regards to seats that fit gas tanks. I think that is specifically with the Corbin seats. Now, if I'm wrong, by all means, hit up those comments and mention in comments if you have anything else you'd like to add about, the comfort or capabilities to add to a DR650 for our high mileage riding. By all means as well, hit those comments up. But with gas tanks, I think it is specifically the Corbin seat you need to be aware of. Now, the one drawback that I've had with the wider seat is when I stand off-road on the bike and this part is pushing into like where my boots are up here on my calf. So it's not quite as comfortable standing up on the bike anymore. However, that's not a deal breaker for me because I ride such long distances on road, on the asphalt, that I think the wider seat it pays for itself in that regard. So it's not a total deal breaker for me, but it does affect standing when you get a wider seat like that, like the ProCycle, when it gets, over 10 inches or so. Just something to be aware of. Now, as far as installing the seat, at least with the ProCycle seat, and I'm pretty sure the Corbin and the Sargent, they're probably all, or the seat concepts, they probably all come with the full seat. Like you don't have to actually remove foam and staple everything together again. So you get the entire seat. It's pretty much just unscrew it from the bike and then put another seat on. It's really simple. Moving on, another thing, the stock gas tank for the DR650, I believe held, I think it was 2.1 gallons. Anyway, I had it figured out that maybe at best I could get 100 miles out of that tank, maybe at 120 if I'm pushing it. I never pushed it that far. At 100 miles, I always gassed up. Now that's a little difficult when you're deep in the backcountry and you're trying dirt roads and paths and things like this. You start getting to the back of your head as you get close to that 100-mile mark. It's like, oh boy, here we go. So you definitely want to get an aftermarket gas tank for the DR650. And that's where I'll head next. There are quite a few options for aftermarket gas tanks available. I went with the Cherubis tanks, and I've had two of them. I had the 6.6 gallon on my DR650, and then I currently have the 5.3 gallon on there now. I've had problems with both tanks. So let's just have a look here. This is the stock tank. That's the stock DR650 tank. I think that's 2.1 gallons. Next to it is the gigantic 6.6 gallon tank. This tank is a beast. And I think you can even get one bigger than this from Safariland. I don't know if they still make it. Anyway, The issue I had with the 6.6 tank is there were two issues, if I'm not mistaken. So the first problem with the 6.6 tank was kind of a tank wobble. As you can see with the 5.3 tank, there's literally no wobble. The larger tank, the 6.6, would actually wobble a bit, and I had to like stuff padding against the frame of the bike to stabilize the tank. And the biggest problem with the 6.6 gallon tank was the oil cooler. It was rubbing into the oil cooler right here. And I literally had to glue in, I'll show you what I did to alleviate that. You can see here, I took pieces of copper and glued them to the plastic, and you can see where that oil cooler was rubbing in. Now, it's not a big deal when you're riding, on road. You're not dealing with bumps and rocks and any, type of turbulence. However, it becomes a problem when you get off-road and that oil cooler starts rubbing into your plastic gas tank, which is going to cause heat and eventually cut into the gas tank. So the copper prevented that, but it didn't give me a peace of mind. So I decided to go with the 5.3 gallon tank. Also, if you drop the bike, having a full 6.6 gallon gas tank made it an absolute bitch to pick the bike up. It was just, it's heavy, man. It is heavy. Like the difference between the 6 gallon tank and the 5 gallon tank, like picking it up with full tanks on the ground is substantial. It's crazy. So those were the problems that I had with the 6.6 gallon tank. Now, I also have a problem with the 5.3 gallon tank. Now, as far as fitment is concerned, it fits great on the bike. There's no tank wobble. It doesn't rub into the oil cooler. All those problems are gone that I had with the 6.6 gallon tank. The problem I now have is the cap for this tank. Now, I don't know if it's just specifically my tank, but I did some searching on DR650 forums, and it appears that this can be a problem with this 5.3 gallon tank. Others are complaining about it. I don't know how prevalent the problem is, but it's definitely a problem of mine, and it's getting the cap to screw back on. So you can see I just made some quick marks to line up right here and here. So when I go to put the cap back on, to screw it back on, I can actually do it. But I mean, I'll fumble around at the gas station for 15 minutes trying to get this cap screwed on again. And this is a very annoying problem. And it hasn't gotten worse, but it still hasn't fixed itself, so to speak. So finding up where the threads align to get the cap back on took a minute. I kind of marked it, and the last time I gassed up just for that last ride, it took me a few minutes, but I got it back on, but it's become just a pain to deal with. So it's like, everything was working fine, and this happens, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if this is a problem that afflicts all the 5.3 gallon gas tanks, or maybe it's just I got a bum tank, but for me, it's a better problem than having the tank like rub into the oil cooler. So those are some problems I've had with both these gas tanks that maybe you're not aware of, or maybe some, like the 6.6 gallon, maybe fits some people's bikes, but the one I got did not fit mine very good at all. And I know there's do-it-yourself options to make that work, but I don't know. The bike works better for me with the 5.3 gallon tank. However, there seems to be a problem with that tank as well. That's what I'm trying to get at. So maybe check out the options for gas tanks, but the 5.3 gallon tank, like I mentioned a little while ago, I can get about 250 miles out of this tank on a full tank. So that's some considerable distance. And I got over 300 with the 6 gallon tank. Yeah, so you definitely want to move into a larger gas tank for your DR650. So next mod that you probably want to consider, although it may not make the bike more comfortable, it will make it so people see you better and that you can see better. And that's switching out the headlight. So I went with the Cyclops, 10.0. H4 LED. I think it was the Ultra. I went with the Ultra version. And that has made a significant difference, especially if I ride in lower light conditions versus the stock headlight. The stock headlight is abysmal, terrible. I highly recommend doing this. It's just a plug and play. It's very simple. You pull let me get the jargon correct here. The cowling, is that what it's called? The cowling? You're gonna pull this off, pull out the headlight, dismantle it, put in the Cyclops light. It just simply plugs in. It really is simple. Trust me, like I mentioned earlier as well, if I can do this, anyone can do this. But switching to that light, and there's the low beam, and there's the high. It's definitely a good idea to deal with your headlight. So where my finger is right here, you can see the back end of the headlight there. That's the housing. There's a fan. There's a fan that runs to cool the bulb. So you want to make sure after you install the headlight that that fan is working. You can hear it when I turn it on. Oh, let me get the microphone over there. All right. So you definitely want to make sure that fan is running after you get that light bulb installed. I've dropped the bike a few times, riding it off-road, bumpy rocks, washboard roads, all these things. It hasn't affected the light of the fan. It's just worked just fine. I haven't really had a problem with like dust, and I ride specifically in the deserts, like dust getting in there and clogging it up. All these things I haven't had a problem with. And it is a very simple install. And lastly, one other modification for your build, upgrade, however you want to call it, is adding a windshield to your DR650. Stock DR650 does not come with a windshield. I know some of you say, I don't need a windshield. However, I like to have a windshield. I went with the MadStat adjustable windshield. This is a spendy piece, about $300. I think it's about $300. However, you can adjust the windshield, hence the name, by these brackets right here. Now, once again, installation of this is actually really simple. It's just some brackets that bolt on, I think they through with your lights here. So if you've already done the gas tank swap, you've dealt with this before, and it's just as simple as just putting these brackets on. There's nothing, it's just not complicated, so I'll just leave it at that. This is the MadStat adjustable windshield for the DR650. Comes in 3 sizes. There's an 18-inch, a 20, and a 22-inch. This, of course, is the 20-inch. I think I should have gone with the 22, to be honest with you. This one works well enough for me, and thus far I've tried having this thing at all different angles. It goes low, it goes high, it goes out. And what I found best that suits me was when I'm on road, I've got this thing pulled to the highest position here, and it pretty much just keeps the wind just above my helmet, just above it. I get a little bit that comes up here and hits me right underneath the chin here, but it's very little. I only notice it really like when it's cold, really cold out, like below freezing cold. But other than that, it keeps the buffeting off my chest, which is very nice, especially once again in the very cold weather. When I get off-road, I'll just drop this, and to drop it, you just twist the knobs here. It's very simple. Walk over here, triple that, like that, and it simply pulls down. And this is out of your way, especially when you're standing. So off-road, you switch it down to this lower position, and that works well enough. I probably could have used a little more windshield. That's why I think I should have gone with the 22. The 20 works for me. I just had it out on a ride. I put up a video, lunch in the Mojave. The wind was 20, 30 miles per hour. This really, I was impressed because I used the windshield and it worked very well for me that day. So it takes a little getting used to. but it's worked very well. So that's another thing that will definitely increase your comfort on high mileage rides on your DR650 is having some of that wind off your chest, off your head. It does make a big difference. All the installation of these things I've talked about are very simple. The most complicated one would probably be the gas tank, and that's actually pretty easy itself. Like I said, if I can do it, then anyone should be able to do it. So a couple things to make your DR a little more comfortable and capable on high mileage riding: seat swap, larger gas tank, windshield, and if you think about it, you're probably going to want to switch out that headlight. There's lots of other things, of course, you can do your build for your bike, depending if you want to make it bigger, make it lighter, all these things. It's just endless with the DR650. That's kind of like that's why I like the bike. You have all these options available to you. Oh, I almost forgot. This made a huge difference in the comfort on my DR650 for higher mileage riding. And this should not be overlooked whatsoever. And that's the foot pegs. I went with the Pro Cycle lowered foot pegs. This made a huge difference. So like I've mentioned, 300, 400, even 500 mile rides, in a day on this DR650. And the one thing that wasn't bothering me after all those miles were especially like my knees. That's because these lowered foot pegs made such a big difference. Seriously, that should have been like one of the first things I talked about, was the lowered foot pegs. So definitely, absolutely highly recommend doing lowered foot pegs. And the install on those is super simple. You just swap out a few bolts down here, and it's just totally worth it. Worth the price. It's worth everything with those foot pegs. I haven't any issues. They're pretty sharp. So off-road, I haven't like slipped off the pegs or anything while I'm standing on them. So that's, yeah, I should have mentioned that first thing was the lowered foot pegs. So there you go. That definitely want to do that one as well. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of those things as they get questions about the gas tank, the windscreen, the seat, and all these things. So folks, thank you very much. Hit up those comments if you have anything you want to add. I've got lots more content on the way, and if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It is free and it helps the channel tremendously. Folks, we'll see you next time. Stay safe out there. D-Rock out. Adios.